My name is Jack Carter. I'm 38 years old, a former staff sergeant in the United States Army. I spent nearly 15 years serving my country, leading men, following orders, surviving things most people will never see. But nothing I faced over there ever prepared me for what it feels like to come home and realize you no longer have a place in your own life. 3 months ago, I lost my job at a private security company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. The kind of work that made me feel like I still had a purpose. They said it was budget cuts, but I saw the way they looked at me during my last evaluation. The quiet judgment, the awkward sympathy, the sense that a man like me belonged to another time, another world. I packed my badge and flashlight into a cardboard box and drove home in silence. That night, my wife, Angela, told me she needed space. She said living with me felt like living with a ghost. I didn't argue. Maybe she was right. My body had come home years ago, but my mind stayed stuck somewhere between sand and smoke. The noise of our house made me anxious. The silence made me worse. Our daughter, Lila, used to run into my arms when I walked through the door. Lately, she just waves from the couch. I don't blame her. Kids can sense distance even when you pretend to smile. When Angela packed a small bag and said she was taking Lila to her sister's for a few days, I only nodded. My voice didn't trust me to fight. Now I'm behind the wheel of my old Ford, the one that rattles when it idles. The road is empty, the radio off, just the hum of tires against asphalt and the sound of my thoughts replaying every failure on a loop. The job, the marriage, the father I was supposed to be. Each one slipping further away with every mile I drive. The night air presses against the windows like a weight. I keep driving past the same gas stations and diners I've seen 100 times, but tonight they all look foreign, like places that belong to someone else's life. My phone buzzes once on the seat beside me. I don't look at it. I already know it's not her. Somewhere between one town and the next, I start to wonder if anyone would notice if I didn't make it home. The thought hits hard and fast, the kind of thought that scares you because it feels too easy. I grip the steering wheel tighter until my knuckles ache. My chest feels heavy, my breath shallow, but I keep driving. I tell myself I just need to think, to clear my head. But the truth is, I don't know where I'm going. The headlights cut through the dark like blades, illuminating nothing that feels familiar. I used to believe I could handle anything if I stayed disciplined, if I stayed in control. But discipline doesn't fix a heart that's already given up. The dashboard clock glows past midnight when I finally slow down near a faded diner sign blinking in the distance. I don't plan to stop, but something about the soft yellow lights and the emptiness of the parking lot makes me pull in. Maybe it's the first place tonight that doesn't expect anything from me. I turn off the engine, sit in silence, and stare at my reflection in the windshield. For the first time in years, I don't recognize the man looking back. The diner looked like it had been forgotten by time. A single flickering sign hung above the door, casting a dull orange glow on cracked pavement. The windows were smudged, the kind of place you'd drive past without ever noticing, unless you had nowhere else to go. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of old grease and burnt coffee. A ceiling fan creaked slowly overhead, its blades turning like it was trying to keep the silence company. There were maybe 3 other people inside, scattered across booths like ghosts that had taken root. I slid into a corner seat, keeping my back to the wall. Old habits from deployment die hard. The waitress didn't ask what I wanted, just poured a cup and placed it in front of me with a nod. I kept my eyes low, hands wrapped around the warm ceramic, letting the heat soak into my palms. I wasn't sure why I stopped there. Maybe I was hoping to sit in the quiet long enough to forget how loud my thoughts had become. Maybe I just didn't want to go home to silence. Then I noticed him. He sat down across from me without a word, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment. I didn't hear him walk in, didn't see him come through the door. 1 second, I was alone, and the next, he was there. He looked to be in his 70s, maybe older, with skin like worn leather and silver hair combed neatly back. His hands rested calmly on the table, fingers slightly curled, like a man used to waiting, but it was his eyes that held me. They weren't just looking at me, They were seeing something in me I didn't even know I was showing. I felt exposed, like the parts of me I'd buried were somehow written all over my face. My first instinct was to stand, walk out, and keep moving like I always did when something felt too close. But I didn't. I stayed. Something about the way he watched me didn't feel threatening. It felt familiar, like he recognized a version of himself sitting across that booth. And for reasons I still can't explain, I let him stay. He didn't say much at first, just sat there watching me, like he was measuring how far gone I really was. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, like a man used to holding things back until they threatened to break him. "You remind me of my boy," that's what he said. I didn't respond right away. There was something about the way he said it that made me feel like I was supposed to know more. Like the next part was coming whether I wanted to hear it or not. "He left the Marines 20 years ago," and the man went on. "Came back from overseas and never really came back at all. Said all the right things to the family, made all the right smiles at birthdays and barbecues, but his eyes were always somewhere else. One day, he packed a bag and vanished. No note, no explanation. Just walked out the front door and never returned. The police looked for a while, then they stopped. After that, it was just him, waiting. I sat still, not sure why he was telling me this. Maybe he thought I was his son. Maybe I looked enough like him to open that old wound. Or maybe he saw something in me that I'd been trying to ignore for months." He leaned forward, hands flat on the table, and stared at me like he was bracing for a storm. Then he said it. "Don't vanish like he did." 5 words. Simple, but they cut through everything I had wrapped around myself like armor. I wanted to tell him I wasn't going anywhere, that I still had time, still had choices. But my throat felt tight, my mouth dry, and I knew the truth. I was already halfway gone. That diner booth felt like a confession booth. I didn't know this man, but I couldn't look away. His story was mine in reverse. He'd lost his son. I was about to become the man who disappeared. And somehow, in that moment, we both knew it. The last night I spent at home plays over in my mind like a scratch tape. Angela stood in the hallway, arms crossed, her face pale and tired. Not angry, just worn down from years of carrying more than her share while I stayed locked in my own silence. I had come home late again, hours after saying I'd only step out to clear my head. The TV was off, the dishes still stacked in the sink. She didn't yell. She just said she couldn't keep doing this, living with a man who never really came back from where he'd been. I tried to speak, but the words stuck. All I had were broken apologies that never fixed anything. Angela walked into the bedroom, leaving the door half open, like a line was being drawn but not yet crossed. Lila had been sitting on the stairs, still in her pajamas, clutching that old stuffed bunny I gave her on her 5th birthday. She looked up at me, those big brown eyes searching for something steady. Then she asked the question that's been lodged in my chest ever since. "Are you leaving for good this time, Dad?" I didn't know what to say. I knelt down and kissed her forehead, told her to go back to bed. But I never answered her. And that silence felt louder than any goodbye. That night I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling for hours. My mind ran in circles, blaming myself, blaming the war, blaming the world. But deep down, I knew. I had been disappearing from them for a long time. The next morning, the house was quiet. Angela was packing a bag. Lila stood behind her, already in shoes, backpack hanging off one shoulder. I didn't stop them. I just stood there, like a man watching his life load itself into a car and pull away. Lila looked at me through the window as they backed out of the driveway. Her hand pressed against the glass. I raised mine, too slow, too late, and that image has followed me ever since. I watched the old man's hands as he spoke. They were rough, veined, steady, the kind of hands that had worked hard and held too much regret. The lines on his face weren't just from age. They looked like they'd been carved there by years of waiting for someone who never came home. He told me how he used to think being a father was about providing, about working late, fixing things, and paying bills. He thought silence meant strength, that love didn't need to be said out loud. Then one day, he looked up and realized his son had stopped coming around, stopped calling, stopped needing him. And by the time he tried to reach out, it was too late. I sat there, listening, but part of me was drifting inward. Every word he spoke hit somewhere deep I didn't want to touch. The distance he described wasn't just his story, it was mine. The quiet dinners, the forced smiles, the empty promises that I'd make it to the next school play. I had been repeating his mistakes without even knowing it. He looked at me for a long moment, eyes steady and kind, but full of something close to pity. Then he said it. Being there is not about being perfect, it's about showing up. Always. The words landed like a blow and a blessing all at once. I thought about Lila's face, the way she looked at me before they left. I thought about how easy it had become to use my pain as an excuse to pull away. How much of her childhood was I trading for my silence? The truth was simple and sharp. I had turned myself into a ghost long before I ever left the house. The old man didn't say much after that. He just sat there, sipping his coffee, letting me fill the quiet with my own thoughts. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not peace, but awareness. I was looking at the man I could become if I didn't change. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I could live with that. I left the diner without saying much. The cold hit me the second I stepped outside, but it didn't bite like before. Something in me had shifted. My hands still shook as I turned the key in the ignition, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from urgency. From the need to do something that actually mattered. The roads were quiet, just a few trucks passing in the opposite direction. I drove with both hands on the wheel, my mind sharper than it had been in months. Every mile that passed felt like a question. Would they open the door? Would Lila still want to see me? Would Angela listen? Or shut me out like she had every right to? I thought about turning around more than once. My chest was tight, my stomach churning, but I kept going. Harlan's words echoed in my head with every turn of the tires. Don't vanish like he did. Over and over, they steadied me. They kept me moving forward even when everything inside screamed to pull away. Angela's sister lived 20 minutes out, in a quiet neighborhood tucked behind rows of tall oaks. I'd been there 100 times, but tonight, it looked different. Dim porch lights, curtains drawn, a driveway that suddenly felt a mile long. I parked, cut the engine, and just sat there for a second. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear anything else. I stepped out and walked to the door, each step heavier than the last. I knocked. Once, then again. The porch light flickered on, and I heard footsteps inside. Angela opened the door, still in jeans and an old sweatshirt, hair pulled back, eyes tired. She looked at me like I was a problem she'd hoped was gone for good. What are you doing here, Jack? Her voice wasn't angry, just flat, worn thin. I took a breath. I'm here for Lila. I'm not leaving without seeing her. She shook her head, already half turning away. This isn't the time. She's finally calm. She doesn't need more confusion. I stepped forward, not to argue, but to be seen. I'm not here to confuse her. I'm here because I've been gone long enough. I can't change everything, but I can show up, and I will. Every chance I get. Angela didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, searching for something real. Something she hadn't seen in me for too long. Then a voice broke through the hallway behind her. Soft, unsteady. Are you staying this time, Dad? I froze. Lila stood near the stairwell, holding that same stuffed bunny in her arms, her eyes wide and glistening. I looked at her, my throat tight, and nodded. I'm here. Before I could say more, she ran to me. Arms wrapped tight around my waist, small and shaking. She buried her face in my jacket and held on like I was the last thing keeping her steady. I dropped to one knee and pulled her close, unable to stop the tears that finally came. Angela watched from the doorway, her face unreadable. But she didn't stop us. She didn't send me away. Lila looked up again. You promise? I swallowed hard. I promise. I'm not perfect, but I'm your dad, and I'm not leaving again. A week later, I found myself driving back toward the diner. It wasn't planned. I had just dropped Lila off at school and started driving without thinking. The road seemed to pull me there, like a thread I hadn't finished following. The place looked exactly the same. Same buzz from the neon sign. Same slow-moving ceiling fan behind the window. I parked, walked in, and headed straight for the booth in the corner. It was empty. No coat, no old man sipping coffee. Just sunlight streaming through smudged glass. The waitress came by, the same one from that night. She smiled politely, but probably didn't recognize me. I asked if the man who'd sat with me before had been in again. Gray hair, strong voice, kind of serious. She gave me a puzzled look. "You mean Harlan Voss?" That name hit me like a whisper I'd already heard. She nodded slowly, said he used to come in all the time. Back before the pandemic. Back before he passed. I just stared at her. She looked concerned, but not surprised. I didn't say much after that. Just ordered coffee and sat in silence, staring at the empty seat across from me. The same seat where a stranger had looked me in the eye and handed me back my life with 5 words. Don't vanish like he did. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was memory playing tricks. Or maybe there are moments in life where something else steps in. Something we don't need to explain to know it was real. I finished my coffee, left a tip, and stepped outside. The morning was crisp, sky washed in soft blue. I stood in the parking lot for a long while, staring at the door, whispering thank you into the breeze. Then I got in my truck and drove home. Not back. Home. Life hasn't magically turned around. I'm still figuring things out. Work comes and goes, the bills don't wait, and Angela and I are learning how to speak without hurting each other. But every morning, I drop Lila off at school. Every weekend, we make pancakes. Every night I get to see her smile is a win I don't take for granted. I'm not a perfect man. I've made mistakes I can't undo. But I show up now. I listen. I hold her hand when she's scared, and I tell her I'm not going anywhere. And the more I show up, the more I see her trust return, piece by piece, like sunlight through cracked glass. If this story means something to you, if it made you think of someone you love, send it to them. Don't wait. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. Because sometimes the simple act of not walking away is what saves a life. Maybe even your own.